Today we're going to be talking about 4 real solutions to housing affordability. In Australia, we have seen some of the highest real estate prices in the whole world. Last year, the prices in Australia rose by 22%. In this video, what we want to do is lay out some of the policy goals that political parties will need to address in the upcoming election. So here are 4 real solutions to housing affordability. In a later video, we're going to be talking about what the 3 political parties present as their policies to address this issue. So 4 real solutions to housing affordability. So number 1, we have been seeing mortgage sizes and residential property prices go up sharply this year. So looking at these graphs here, we see that residential property price index has turned up very sharply. We've seen something like 22% increase since last year in property prices. And what that means is that the mortgages that people need to take out in order to buy a home has grown even larger. And so that kind of shows up in the data as well. We're seeing larger mortgages in New South Wales, in Queensland, in Victoria, everywhere, all throughout Australia, in regionals, in capital cities, everywhere. And what this means is that Australians are going to be more indebted than ever before. More and more of their income will be going towards just putting a roof over their heads. That means that money will not be going to businesses, to restaurants, to all the things that Australians generally do. What we've also noticed over the last several decades, actually, is that we're seeing home ownership rates by age group. We're seeing home ownership rates decline among the youngest. So you can see in this graph, 25 to 34-year-olds sharply decline. And at the same time, you're seeing the oldest, 65 and over group, they're actually owning homes at even larger rates, and even greater rates. So what this is doing is taking from the young, taking from the poor, and giving to the rich. That's how the Australian housing market, the real estate policies, housing affordability policies that our governments have set up, that's what the outcome is. So here are the 4 real solutions to housing affordability. We all know it's a problem. The first thing we need to do is we need to reduce investors, and we'll talk about why very soon. The second thing is we need to fix public housing. Public housing is essential to making sure houses are affordable, that everyone who needs a house can get a house. The third, this one is pretty obvious. We need to increase supply. With a growing population, we need more houses for people to live in. This is crucial. Property developers will agree with this. Almost everyone you talk to, increasing supply is crucial in order to getting housing affordability correct. And then finally, helping renters. This is harder to quantify specifically, but qualitatively, you can see that Australia doesn't have particularly good tenancy agreements and conditions for renting. So fixing this will be crucial to fixing housing affordability. What we know doesn't work. Helping buyers only helps sellers. So when we are talking about cutting stamp duty taxes, when we're talking about reducing interest rates, when we're talking about free lender's mortgage insurance, all of these things are helping buyers, and this doesn't help anyone. This doesn't help first home buyers. It doesn't help buyers at all. All it does is it lifts prices overall. So one of the things that's being talked about right now, there's free LMI, there's reductions in stamp duty. All of these kinds of things, all they do is they provide a bigger number for people to come to auctions with. And when everyone comes to an auction with bigger number, the prices for those properties just go up and up. This doesn't help anyone. What we're seeing is that first home buyers, one of the things that's holding them back is their ability to save a large enough deposit. It's not generally their serviceability requirements. So what this does is it gives them more money to bid at the top level, right? So if they could bid 600,000 before, now they can bid 700,000. All that does is that investors who already have a deposit and already have serviceability on their side, they still beat out the first home buyers, but at much higher and higher prices. Another thing is that one of the ways that in Australia we have allowed our Parliament to completely avoid addressing this issue altogether was by hoping that unelected bodies like APRA, the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, and the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, for them to focus on housing affordability. But that is not their mandate. APRA, all they do is they care about banks and financial stability. When they change requirements on who gets a loan, they don't look at housing affordability. The only thing they look at is whether or not it will contribute towards financial stability in Australia's financial markets. Same thing with the RBA. RBA does not care about housing affordability when they choose what the interest rate's going to be. What they do is they look at the unemployment rate and they look at inflation. Those are the only things they care about. They don't care about housing affordability. Housing affordability has to be addressed by Parliament. So the first thing we talked about was reducing investors. Why do we say that? Well, this is a graph that economist Saul Isleck put out in one of his papers. And what we can see here is that as first home buyers increase, as the number of loans that are given to first home buyers increase, we see investors sharply decreasing. And it's an inverse relationship throughout. When investors are in the market, first home buyers are pushed out. And when first home buyers are in the market, investors are pushed out. So what are the intents of the first home buyers? Well, first home buyers are generally young people. They want to start a family. They want to have housing security. That's the reason they want to buy a house. What do investors want to do? They want to invest in housing for primarily capital gains, primarily positively geared houses. There are better investments out there. I'm sure they make a little bit of money off some positively geared houses, but primarily the gains from capital gains. And so investors are there trying to make a buck. First home buyers are trying to survive. And so by reducing investors, right, what we'll see is a uptick in the number of first home buyers. And what that would mean is reducing investors would be done by getting rid of negative gearing, by getting rid of the capital gains tax discounts, getting rid of the various thousands of different tax loopholes that investors use to make property profitable. Next part is about fixing public housing. Australia has some of the lowest rates of public housing in the developed world. So obviously public housing is something that is administered by the states. But as an example, we look at the New South Wales social housing as a proportion of total housing, and we can see that it has been declining over the last decade. And this is just the last decade. We'll see that the number of housing, the quality of the housing, all of these things, social housing has been degrading and it has been not being invested in for a very long time. Even when it is invested in, it's a tiny, tiny amount of money and it's completely inadequate. Also, another thing about Australia is that we have some of the lowest rates of public housing as a proportion of total housing in the developed world. We can see countries like Canada, England, Scotland, all of those countries have much, much higher levels of public housing available. Then we talk about increasing supply. Obviously, everyone agrees that increasing supply in the housing market is really, really important. Last several years, we have seen a downturn in the number of houses that are listed on the market. Primarily, this is at least somewhat to do with the fact that there is huge amount of capital gains to be received. And so because of that, there's just no one wants to sell, because if they just wait another few months, they could get an extra 10,000, 20,000, 250,000, whatever it is. So it's a giant amount of incentive for people to hold on to houses, which makes this problem worse. By definancializing housing, that would greatly improve the supply. But ultimately, when house prices fall, obviously developers will leave the market. And so what needs to happen is that government needs to come in and create a public housing authority, which will get contractors who will hire architects, who will hire civil engineers and architects and all the other contractors and various other people in order to build houses. Fundamentally, government needs to be involved in building houses. Otherwise, supply won't increase or houses won't be affordable. It'll be one or the other. And then one of the things that makes Australians want to buy houses so badly, it's the fact is that renting in Australia really sucks. For example, if you've got a pet, it's a pain in the ass to find a house that will allow you to stay there. Having a pet is terrible in Australia, despite the fact that so many people in Australia have pets. Australians love pets, but Australian landlords hate pets. Another thing is that minor changes to property that a tenant would want to do, something simple like having a vegetable garden or being able to put a picture up, all of these things, there is such a barrier to doing even small changes. There's also no security in tenure. Most contracts in Australia last between 6 months and 12 months. It's very hard to get much longer contracts than that. And that's what makes it very risky. Even if you have a contract, it's possible for the landlord to come in and use various reasons to kick you out. So even when you have a contract, you don't have security in tenure. And also, rent increases are not regulated. It means that at any time, the landlord can decide to increase your rent, and you have nothing to do. There's no recourse. Most of the residential tenancy authorities and things like that in the various states are fairly weak. There's not a very strong tenancy union, tenancy representation. So what happens is that because landlords and real estate agents know the rules and know how to get around the rules, they are able to steamroll tenants 9 out of 10 times. And so by helping renters and giving security in the rental market, it will mean that Australians can start a family without having to buy a home. Because right now, if you don't have housing security, it's very hard to start a family. And pretty much those are the main 4 solutions that are required that policy needs to address. It's about increasing the number of public housing out there. It's about increasing the supply. It's about helping renters. And it's about reducing investors in the market. All of these things will help housing affordability. In the next video, what we're going to be looking at is what are the 3 major political parties in Australia, the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, and the Australian Greens. How do they address this? What do their policies actually do? And does it actually address these 4 real solutions to housing affordability? Thanks for listening, guys. Please do check out the other video. We'll see you next time.